If you were at the first service, that's funny because I had the mic in my pocket and we had all this static and Jackson was like, well, it's you. I'm like, it's not me. I didn't touch anything. And then I moved my leg and it went. I think we need a new little thingy-majig, don't we? Maybe. Or maybe I.
It's still in your pocket.
No. Well, I didn't for the. Okay. Then maybe that will make it better. Oh, it does. How about that?
You learned something from me when I learned all these things from you.
There is a God, right? You can learn even something from me. You know, I didn't think of this before, but how many times did you need to be asked? Think about that. How many times did you need to be asked? Because if you really listen to this song that Bruce just prayed, you know, God's there before you're ever even asked. God is always there, ever present. How many times did you need to be asked? I grew up in the church, so I'm not even sure what that answer is for me. But if I go deeper with it, how many times did I need to be asked to take it seriously and to really listen to God? Oh yeah, that number's pretty high. You know, one of my fondest childhood memories was of my dad's 1972 Pontiac Granville convertible. I mean, that thing was as long as this center pew. I remember playing soccer in the rain, and they had to take different soccer balls and scrape off the mud, and I rode home in the trunk of that Pontiac Granville convertible. But one of my fondest memories was of the summertime. We would be next door at the Shaw's house playing football. And the Shaws had 3 older girls. Billy was my favorite friend, and the girls would kick our butts. And afterwards, we would all pile in that same Pontiac Granville. It was chocolate brown with a light tan interior. It was really just wonderful. And this back seat was, I mean, probably the size of one of these back pews here. I mean, we fit a dozen of us in it. Half of us would be down in the wheel well, fearful for our lives, because this was in the day and age before we had shoulder belts. Do you remember this? We only had lap belts. And of course, there was too many of us for the lap belts. So half of us would be down in the wheel well, scared to death. The other half of us would be up on the back of the seat, trying to catch as much wind as we could, like dogs with their heads out the window. I'll let you guess where I sat. But we would head down Route 19 south, and we would go and get ice cream. Ah, those were the days. 31 flavors. Little orange spoons in the bottom corner there to sample as much as you can. I give my parents a lot of credit for the patience they had, because sometimes I would taste like a whole section before we got it. It reminds me of a joke, or maybe it's a groaner that I recently heard about the 31 flavors. So 2 birds were sitting in a tree, and one of them says, "I'm real hungry." And the other one says, "Me too." And so they fly around until they find a really nice, luscious garden that had just been tilled. I mean, you could just see the worms crawling around at it. And they sit down and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat. And the one says to him, I think I'm so full I can't fly back up to that tree. And the other one says, "Yeah, me too." And so he says, "Let's just lay here in the warm sun." "Okay," said the younger, naive robin. So they plopped down and they just laid in the sun. No sooner had they fallen asleep than a big fat cat snuck up and gobbled them all up. And as the fat cat sat there washing his face after his meal, he thought, I just love Baskin Robbins. You know what? You laughed more than the first service. The first service, they just groaned and groaned and groaned. So, I wonder if post-pandemic, if we're not so consumed with the relative freedom that we have, that we're just ignoring and forgetting about the church. I wonder if there's another part of us that's so content with worshiping online that we've just had our fill and had our fill and had our fill. I wonder if this is a problem that we have. There is something about being in community. Don't get me wrong. In the first service, this place was empty. It felt like the pandemic because we had an inch of snow come right at that right time, right when everyone was coming here this morning. And they said, turn around, back in. I can eat my breakfast while I worship. Isn't that nice? It's not a bad thing, but faith is a community thing. Iron sharpens iron, right? We need each other. We need each other. There's a story that offers a little bit of insight. It's about two men who have been business partners for 20 years. And they run into each other one morning at an Eaton Park on a Sunday morning. And the one man says to the other, what are you doing on this morning? And he says, I'm taking the kids skiing to Seven Springs. What about you? And he says, I'm going to worship. I'm going to church. And the skier asked, why don't you give up that church stuff? And the churchgoer says, what do you mean? And the skier says, well, we've been partners for 20 years. We've worked through good things and bad things together. We've attended 1,000,001 board meetings together. Our families have even vacationed together in all these years. And you've never once asked me about going to church. You never once invited me to go with you. Obviously, it doesn't mean that much to you. You see, like this churchgoer, I think that too many of us feel so good about our faith. And don't get me wrong, it is a strength of Calvin. Calvin grows spiritual redwoods, and that is a good thing. But I think we can get too comfortable. We all have heard some families saying that, they don't want to impose their religion upon their children. They want them to find their own way. Really? We want our own kids to find their own way in this world? You want your friends to find their own way in this world? The questions that I'm getting at is are we going to be like Philip, who when Christ said, follow me, he ran frantically to his best friend. His deepest, most sincere desire was for his best friend to come and see this life that I found, this community that loves no matter what you look like or what you act like. This community that literally has miracles of healing in it. This community that is truly of God. Come and see. See, Philip had what we need. He endured Because, his buddy Nathaniel said, come on, Phil, what's the thing? We're from this big town like Cranberry or Wexford. You've got to be kidding. The promised one is going to come from this little place in the middle of nowhere called Zelienople? Can anything good really come from Nazareth? He asked. And Philip was patient, and he endured. And he asked again. I know some of you are here because some of the other people here have asked you and asked you again and again and again until maybe you finally did come. I heard a story this last week about Pat Strutt, someone who came to be a part of this church because you invited them. That's the way it happens. It hardly ever happens because the pastor invites them. I get paid to do that. That's what I'm supposed to do. Come and see, patiently and enduring. And Jesus arrives and he sees something special in Nathanael, this frank guy from Cana. Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And Nathanael is receptive, and he says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus answers, do you believe because God gave me the power to see you under a fig tree? You ain't seen nothing yet. Come and follow me, and you will see much greater things. It's clear to Jesus that Nathanael is only at the beginning of his faith journey, but if he continues to step forward, he will see things and his faith will increase beyond his wildest dreams. You see, in spite of our reservations, our doubts, our skepticism, each of us is invited to be a part of this new thing that God is doing. You do know we're in the middle of another Reformation, right? Pre-pandemic, we are at the beginning of another Reformation. They happen about every 500 years. Go and look in your history books. We are now in the front to the middle part of a new Reformation, of this new thing that God is doing. And I think the pandemic really just fast-forwarded it. God is inviting us to this new thing. Despite our fears, our doubts, our skepticism, God is inviting us. Some of us are like Philip. We're eager and we're willing. We're encouragers. We'll ask 100 times so that you will say yes. And some of us are like Nathanael. We need a little bit of encouragement. But we're all just one step away. One step away from being closer to Jesus. The first step may seem uncertain, but make no mistake, God is so great and so good. You can journey your entire life, and there's always another step to take. That's how amazing, how great, how good, how everly beyond good and great God is. All of our lives, we can take step towards God, and there's always another step to take. And the benefits are guaranteed. You will see greater things, says Christ to all who follow. Well, you well know by now that I am that fun-loving guy who was up on the back of the seat. Not just sitting in the seat, but up on the back of the seat. My parents would threaten to pull over until I sat down in the seat. How wonderful, how amazing would it be if we could all pile into that 72 Pontiac Granville with the top down and go and get some ice cream together. Okay, maybe today in a minivan with the heat on high. All of us together, making our fondest childhood memories look like a mere 31 flavors. You know, now there's about 1,000,001 flavors. I had champagne and pistachio ice cream once at a wedding. It was delicious. Champagne and pistachio ice cream. There's not just 31 flavors in God's kingdom. There are infinite. One for even people who don't like ice cream, I bet. I can guarantee it, right? I found out there's people who actually don't like ice cream. And the promise of Christ is together we will see greater things. Friends, you all know that I am into challenges. And so if you're like Philip, if you're an encourager, if you're sitting high on the back of the seat, catching the wind like you can like a dog with his head out the window, I challenge you to invite your family and your friends to come and see. And if you're like Nathaniel, with your fear down on the floor in the back seat, still deciding whether or not this whole thing is a good idea, I challenge you to take a step in your faith to give it a try. I challenge you to invite your family, those closest to you, those whom you love the most, to come and see. Invite your friends and your family to come and see. Christ's promise is that together we will see greater things and hear more wonderful sounds. Amen? Amen, Ian. Amen.